Hello everybody. Today I'm going to show you guys how to draw a dragon. The dragons on the Eragon books, like those kinds, is what you're going to be drawing today. They are sort of like the dragons on the Eragon books, so if you want to draw Saphira or any specific dragon, this is not what I'm doing. But what I am doing is drawing like custom dragons that looks in the pose of the dragon on Eragon, the book. So the first thing you're going to need to do is to draw these circles. Draw a circle about right in the middle of the page, about this big, and it's going to be the main part of the head. You're going to want to draw a little line about right there, and another one right here, and draw another smaller circle right about in this area. This is going to be the end of the snout. And then you're going to want to slightly join them and add this as like that. And now you're going to want to draw a big line that goes all the way down to the bottom, or however you want to stop it. That will be the neck. So next, you're going to want to make the actual face. The first thing you're going to do, you're going to start outlining the eyes, and you're going to draw the tips, and you're going to do right there. You're going to create its mouth, first of all, like that. And you can make it smile, do whatever you want with it, but it should end about right there, so come somewhat like this. And then you should give it the bottom jaw, that, and about right there, like so. And then you're going to give it the nose, somewhat like that shape, and you're going to want to do that. And then got this side. So you're going to do this, the U kind, do that, give it the bony look. It's gonna give you the bony look on the front. And now you're gonna draw the other side of the nose. Now you're gonna want to draw like a line like this if you want for the eyes, and then give you another line like this for the horns and the things, whatever those are called. Not really sure what they're called, but and then you're gonna want to draw a little oval right here, which is a cheek. You're gonna draw the cheek right there. And you're gonna want to draw some spikes, like cheekbones right there, little cheek spikes, because that's what they do. You can draw as many as you like, as long as they fit within the cheek. And now you're gonna draw this eye. Draw it nice and big. Make sure it looks like an eye, and then connect it with that. And then you're going to want to make like the eyebrow sort of thing, but it's going to connect over with this long thing right there. And then you're going to want a eyebrow spike at the end of the eyebrow, right about there. It's going to join right there. If you want, you can make the pupils. Well, not if you want, but that's one of the steps. Draw a slit sort of, and then just kind of darken it into like a circle kind of shape. It gives it a nice pupil right there. And then, yeah, so just do that. And then you're going to want to do the thing right there on the other side. And then give it the head shape. Then you're going to just continue the head shape in the neck lightly. So if you want to edit it, you can go ahead and do that later on. Same thing with this, like that. And give it the neck. So this gives it the neck. You want to put some spikes up here. Start it right about there. And continue it at equal intervals. It looks more like an actual dragon. And spikes get bigger as they go down the spine, so you might want to draw them a little bigger every time. Okay, one sec. As you do that, just gonna continue, just do the rest of it. Okay, so you're gonna finish the spikes. So the next thing you wanna do is you're gonna start putting a little, like the small details. Mainly, first of all, you're gonna need some of the lines right here. And start doing some of the shading and such. You may want to start erasing these lines, in fact. Yeah, if you want, probably should add this thing right there to show the beginning of that. Okay. Go ahead and erase this and all that stuff. Fine if you can see it really lightly, because you're gonna start adding scales anyway, and the scales is just gonna keep them from showing. So this is basically the base, so it's not very hard to draw one of these things, because just want to make sure you got the curves right and the proportions correct. That's mainly what matters in this. And then you just have to make sure the details are good. First, it may not look much like a dragon, and that's fine. I mean, you gotta try it a few times to get it good. But it's pretty nice. I mean, it's gonna start looking after a few times. It's gonna start looking pretty much like a pretty cool dragon. So yeah. Now you're gonna start wanting to start the scales, because you're gonna try. It's better to shade after you do the scales, because the scales always get if you shade and then do the scales, it just gets in the way sometimes. But I mean, it's your wish. I mean, you can shade before you do the scales if you want. I mean, I usually shade the facial features before, because I mean, you're not gonna add much scales on the facial features, because that's where the scales start getting small and it looks a little bit more like leather. And you can basically start shading. Just make sure you choose which side you're gonna shade on and do it correct. Oh, by the way, if you want, you can add like a fang or two, because dragons do have fangs, so you know. And you probably already do, but yeah. And you can give it a smile, a frown, do whatever you want with it. Give it a light shade right there. Show the cheek isn't just a thing there, and that it is actually some separate things. Make sure the nose is nice too, and give it sort of like some folds right there in front, and some shading. Make sure they got good shades in the nostril right there. If you want, you can start smearing it a bit, getting the rub. And make sure you have those bones right there. Those actually have a pretty big effect on it, better more than you think. If you want, you can add like a spike in the underside of the chin. Some dragons do have that. Especially if you see, well, not Glader. Yeah, Glader actually. In Brisingr, if you see him, he has that. So if you want, you can add a spike. You can do whatever. So now you're gonna start with the scales. The scales is something else. Like, you're gonna have to start off with diagonal lines, and make sure you do these nicely and very lightly so that they don't show much. But you're gonna want to have them even. And this is actually some of the most important parts, because if you don't get the scales right, it will not look proper. And if it doesn't look correct, then it's not going to look like a dragon. So you're going to want to get the scales nice and correct and make sure they overlap correctly. Right when you get right here, you're going to want to start going like that, because the scales get smaller through the bottom of the throat and they overlap more because the head is curved like that. You're going to want to do that. And make the scales will get smaller. So you have one row right there. And you're going to do the exact same thing like this. So you get a bunch of diamond shapes sort of things. And that's where the scales will be. I'm only playing this whole part in case you need like reference, because this is actually kind of hard to do to get the scales correctly, because if you don't, then it won't look like scales. And it starts getting hard around the neck, around like the right there. This area is like where the scales are moving a lot. See, you're gonna want to head and kind of skip this so that you can kind of join the two parts together properly. Worry about this later while you're actually making the scales. So technically right now, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to make these scales, because I'm going to start at the head and then go down. But if you want, you can go down and up. I mean, either way works fine. I just like to start at the head. So first you're going to want to make really tiny scales right here, because many scales, like this is where the scales start transitioning into the leather you feel right there. Then you're going to start slowly making them bigger. And in a while, you're going to start using those things as a guideline. And try to get them as good as possible. I mean, it's not a big deal. You don't have to do the scales, actually. It just helps if you do, because it looks more like an actual dragon. So I recommend doing the scales. If you want to leave it without scales, it's fine. But it just doesn't look much like a real dragon. So right about here, start enlarging the scales to form like these the diamonds right there. And make sure you have the scales correct around the spikes, because that's also pretty important. Make sure they kind of like overlap through the spikes. It may be kind of hard to do that at some points, but you're gonna have to do it. So see, you start getting kind of tough right here. You're gonna want to start doing scales over here too. About like continuing these lines right here. And right around here, it's gonna start getting more like the leather feel again. You have to start right here with actually kind of sort of medium-sized scales so that it merges in with the other side. And if you want the scales to be pointed, I mean, you can do that too. I just like mine rounded, like my scales. Well, not my scales, you know what I mean, like the scales on this dragon rounded. Just seems more natural to me. I mean, not to you, I mean, that's not my opinion, it's your opinion. But see, you're gonna have to start adding like extra layers here, more than there are in here. It's kind of tough to actually get the hang of it, but you will eventually, so don't worry. Just sort of tough to... This is like the toughest part for the scales, because of the way they overlap around this area. And make sure you don't accidentally draw on this, because that's actually pretty important. The scales start getting medium sized right now. I know sometimes it doesn't really fit these diamonds yet. They will eventually, so like right around here in this area, they'll start fitting this and you can follow this really nicely. But I'm going to go ahead and show you this because this is the toughest part. So if you need me as a guidance, you can go ahead and use that because I understand this is a hard part. So yeah, you're going to need to do this properly so that it works. Start adding some extra scales here so that it actually looks proper because sometimes you're going to need to add extra irregular layers of scales so that it actually works out properly. Because it's not really ever perfect because this is the neck is where it bends and stuff. And if you see it starts getting more regular, this area, it's always kind of a little harder and irregular around this area. But after you're done with it, it seems a lot easier because it just looks a lot better than it normally looks like it does. If you want to darken the chin spikes so they stand out against the scales, that's probably a smart thing to do because so that they actually show up, because sometimes then they'll look like they're blending in with the scales and you won't be able to see them as well. See right here, I'm just going to add an extra scale right there, even though you're probably not supposed to do that. There's not really a supposed to, I mean, you're drawing, so. You're going to darken this area around, like this part, so you're not really going to need to really cram those tiny scales right there. If you don't need to, like just around this area, you're not going to need to put scales there because you're going to darken it out really dark because of the shadow from the head. And also right here, you're going to need a shadow. But we'll worry about that after this. So, we're going to start making the scales a little bigger. And see, around the smaller scales, it's going to start fitting kind of odd. And if you want, you can skip a layer and then start using these things as guidelines. Sort of. You can start adding normal sized scales. And now you can start following the diagonals. Once you start following the diagonal, it's going to be pretty easy, so it's just really, you're just going to make sure you do it correctly. Follow diagonals properly. And if you want, you can make the scales kind of protrude a little bit right there, so you can see the layering of it. Make it 3D looking, same with this side. So it's just gonna make it look cooler and more realistic. So yeah, just go ahead and do this with the rest of the dragon. Yeah, so basically you're just gonna finish off the scales somewhat like that, so that it's smooth and transitions properly. Now you're gonna start making the transitions toward the face where it's scales and then just slowly turns into like the leather feel. You're just gonna wanna put light scales around the cheek, really light. Just make sure that they shouldn't like show up really much. They should just be somewhat like circular shaped, more round than the normal scales. And just give it like a small layer of scales. And by the time you get around here, it's gonna not be there. It's like there's not gonna be as many scales as there was in the, and it's gonna start fading because the scales will start joining together to make like skin, like leather like skin. So it's somewhat like that. Same with around here, the skin starts getting like that. If you want, you can make little round things to show like the little round shaped scales of the leather feel. Somewhat like that. And same thing around the snout. Give it small roundness. And you can do some last bit editing and stuff. Make sure everything looks nice. And start shading after that. Oh yeah, and also you can like give it some of the circle stuff right there. And there's a little line of scaled, a very thin layer, somewhat like the cheek over here. So yeah, this gives you the smooth kind of transition into the leather feel. And after that, you're gonna just shade. So gonna want to shade correctly, give it a good feel, and draw more prominent lines. And you're gonna start shaping the features to the exact point you want them at. And you're gonna do the very fine editing and shading. And this is pretty important too, so it gives it the 3D realistic look. Because just because it's a dragon doesn't mean it shouldn't look realistic, because, I mean, dragons aren't real, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be realistic, because you still want it to look nice and realistic right there. And make sure it's like a little rounded, and it starts going off a little flat right there, the shape of the snout. And you're going to start wanting to shade in like the sides of the scales, giving it the 3D look. So the scales look nice and 3D. And you don't have to do it with like all these scales. I mean, just mainly this side, because this is the side that's mainly shaded a lot. It's gonna make it dark and give it like a really dark right there. And the eyes too. If you want, you can make it like rounded more. Just give it a small vertical thing there and darken it out. You know, just start darkening everything, giving the final editing and everything. So give it the nice finishing touches. Start giving it the shading look. Start lightly shading the whole thing. Make sure the spikes don't have any shading in them. Well, try not to get that much shading in them because they are kind of bone white, kind of. The bone white and stuff. Make sure you shade this area. Pretty much get all the minute details. Okay. So you're pretty much done after this. Just add some finishing touches. The rest of it's just your opinion. Make it however you want to. And so you get a good dragon. If you want, you can sign it, add a background, whatever you want. I mean, that's all your choice. And yep, that's it. So yeah, bye, and please leave comments. Just don't be mean and stuff. So yep, okay, bye.